Welcome back. A lot of action came from the White House this week. Some recording of the president and his lawyer were released. The administration's exercising executive power to keep conversations with world leaders a secret, and farmers are getting a bailout from some relief in the trade war. These are all things to talk about this morning with Democratic political consultant Porter McNeil and former Iowa Republican Party Chair Steve Grubbs. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
So to start things off, this week the Trump administration announced $12 billion in assistance for farmers who've seen their crop value plummet from the tariffs imposed by China in the back and forth trade war. Is this a fair policy? And what about the other industries that are feeling these effects as well?
Well, I think there's an appetite for some adjustment in trade policy. I don't think there's an appetite for trade war. I know that manufacturing companies are seeing increased prices. And I know that the Soybean Association, the Corn Growers Association, the Farm Bureau, they have deep concerns about the trade war. So this may modify that and modulate that.
Yeah, you know, I think, first of all, trade wars, tariffs, not considered a good thing by anybody, but if it evens out the playing field a little bit in the short term, I think that'll be a positive. We saw Friday's numbers come out that soybean exports jumped 9%. So that's going to carry soybean farmers in the short term. In our ideal world, the $12 billion never has to be spent because this comes to a close sooner rather than later. And it's tough, though, because China is not a democratically elected government, so they're not under as much pressure. But having said that, they are still trying to pay for military and space program and lots of expansion in their country, so they have to sell to Americans. That's the bottom line. So I think the Trump administration at least has some bargaining power in this situation.
Thank you. Switching gears, a recording of a conversation between President Trump and his attorney Michael Cohen went public this week. It indicates then-candidate Trump discussed setting up a payment to Playboy model Karen McDougal to keep her quiet about an affair she had with the president before he ever took office. The Washington Post reports federal agents obtained recordings of more than 100 phone calls. How much has this raised the stakes in the investigation into the president?
Well, you know, I think obviously you don't want these kind of headlines, and I need a scorecard to keep track from day to day. Today's Sunday, tomorrow's Monday. There may be more charges and countercharges. You don't want your own attorney to go on the outside like this with Cohen. So the White House needs to get some stability in this situation, and it just seems like it's unraveling. The walls of the Trump Tower seem to be collapsing.
Yeah, I think through the rest of the Trump presidency, these sorts of headlines will be commonplace. They have been for almost 2 years. You know, but if there's a lesson from history, if you look at Bill Clinton's Me Too moment with Monica Lewinsky, Republicans spent a lot of time focusing on scandal and Monica Lewinsky, and at the end of the day, Bill Clinton really came out on top in that situation. And so the lesson that politicos took from it was, if you keep your base happy, then for the most part you can survive scandal. And we see Democrats and Republicans all over the country resigning for different issues, and when their base turns on them, they're pretty much done.
Thank you, guys. And we're going to switch gears again here. We want to try to cover as much as possible because there's a lot going on in the White House today. So some conservative Republicans in the House of Representatives this week pushed for the impeachment of Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. He supervises Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian election meddling. Speaker Paul Ryan announced he doesn't support that move. How much division is there among the Republican Party right now?
Well, I'll start with this one. You know, there's a lot of gnashing of teeth over Mueller and the investigation. The challenge is when Republicans initially authorized this investigation, this probe, they didn't narrow it down enough. And so now you've got this ongoing probe that keeps reaching out into more and more things. And it's hard to know if it's going to last for 4 years, 2 years. There really doesn't seem to be any end in sight. And so there's concern on the Republican side that it won't ever come to a close during this first 4 years. And so, you know, it needs to come to some reasonable conclusion in a basically narrower scope.
Well, I think there may be an end in sight, but as you know, there are more than a dozen indictments of Russian nationals in this. So as they continue to peel away the onion and see more of the infiltration of Russian into our national security, our election security, it's going to continue until they reach a conclusion. So I think The Freedom Caucus needs to back off on their partisan politics. It's better to reach a conclusion and let the facts come where they may, and let the investigation continue. And I think the majority of the country feels that way.
And so this week, the White House put an end to providing summaries of calls the president makes with foreign leaders. Doesn't the public have a right to know about the content of these calls?
Well, you know, he may not want the notes from his meeting with Putin in Helsinki. That would come to mind. But I think, you know, presidents always try to control the news. I don't think they have success at that. This goes back. Many administrations try to control the flow. I think a better policy with the press and with the public is transparency and a full disclosure of those. That's been the tradition. I think that would work better.
Yeah, I think it's a catch-22. You know, as a member of the public, I would love to know what's said in these conversations. At the same time, I think it's difficult to be frank. And if you think about your own conversations in business or otherwise, you're able to be frank when you know that there's some confidentiality. And I really don't know anybody in business or government who would like to have all of their conversations made public, and that goes for my Democrat friends and my Republican friends.
What kind of consequences do you think that this could have?
As far as the...
Just, you know, what it can have, you know, on the country and being, you know, not being transparent, do you think it could have consequences?
Well, it's interesting. In city government in Iowa, they're required to have everything transparent. In the legislature, the Republican and Democrat caucus can get together and the open records laws are not applied. So the Democrats get together privately and decide how they're going to govern, Republicans get together privately and decide how they're going to govern. I would say, at least in the case of the state of Iowa, it's worked out just fine.
I think that when you have questions among the public about his meetings with, for instance, Putin, you know, it erodes the public confidence in the White House if you don't provide some sunshine on those meetings. And I think that's the threat of this, is that you erode public confidence.
Thank you guys very much. Thank you both for being here today. I know we could keep talking, but there's still a lot we need to cover.